The World Cup is finally here. The stadiums are full, the goals are flowing, the atmosphere is everything FIFA promised. And yet, only days into the tournament, a different story has started to emerge. A player refuses FIFA's demands. Athletes challenge tournament conditions. Federations complain about travel, visas, and logistics. Across North America, small incidents keep appearing. On their own, they seem unrelated. Together, they point towards something much bigger. Because for the first time in World Cup history, the people inside the tournament are openly pushing back against the system surrounding it. And nowhere was that tension more visible than on June 15th. Spain, one of the favorites to win the World Cup, failed to score against Cape Verde, a nation of just over 500,000 people playing in only its second World Cup. Most people saw an upset. What they didn't see was the bigger story hiding behind it. Because over the first week of World Cup 2026, 5 different incidents have revealed the same uncomfortable truth. The tournament FIFA designed is not always the tournament players, coaches, and federations are actually experiencing. The first warning sign came from one of the biggest names in football. Vinicius Jr. had just helped Brazil secure a crucial result. The cameras were waiting. The broadcasters were waiting. FIFA's media operation was waiting. Then, something unexpected happened. He refused. Not because he was injured, not because he was unavailable, he simply chose not to participate. Reports suggested a fine could follow. The response from Brazil was blunt. They would pay, but they would not comply. On the surface, it seemed like a small story. One interview, one player, one disagreement. But football is changing. Modern players are no longer dependent on traditional media to communicate with supporters. They have their own platforms, their own audiences, their own influence, and increasingly, some of them are questioning obligations that exist primarily because football has become a global entertainment business worth billions. Vinicius wasn't protesting a microphone, he was challenging the assumption that every commercial obligation deserves automatic compliance, and the reaction from supporters suggested many people understood exactly why. Then came Cape Verde. Spain entered the match expecting 3 points. They left with 1. For 90 minutes, one of the strongest teams in world football searched desperately for a breakthrough that never arrived. Save after save, clearance after clearance, Cape Verde refused to break. The result instantly became one of the biggest stories of the opening week. But what made it significant wasn't simply that Spain failed to win. It was what the results suggested about the new World Cup itself. FIFA expanded the tournament to 48 teams, believing it would create more opportunities and more global representation. Critics worried it would also create more one-sided matches. Instead, the opening week produced the opposite. Smaller nations looked organized, competitive, fearless. The expanded format wasn't exposing weakness, it was exposing resilience. And behind that resilience was another factor: travel, recovery, adaptation. Every team is dealing with challenges previous World Cups never demanded at this scale. Cape Verde didn't just survive Spain, they survived the same exhausting tournament environment as everyone else. What makes Cape Verde's performance even more remarkable is that this was exactly the kind of result many people believed. The expanded World Cup would make less likely. Critics of the 48-team format warned that smaller nations would struggle to compete with the traditional powers. Instead, the opening week has produced evidence pointing in the opposite direction. More teams have arrived, better prepared, better organized, more confident. The gap between football's elite and everyone else has not disappeared, but it may be smaller than many expected. For FIFA, that is both a success and a complication. A success because the tournament feels more competitive. A complication because every surprise result invites questions about whether the expanded format is creating pressures that affect everyone equally, but then the complaints became impossible to ignore. Before the tournament began, players had already warned about the heat. Medical experts raised concerns, sports scientists raised concerns, athletes raised concerns. The request was simple: more protection, more flexibility, more emphasis on player welfare. FIFA responded with cooling breaks and existing protocols. Yet for many players, the debate never disappeared, because the issue wasn't only about temperature. It was about trust. Trust that player welfare would remain more important than scheduling requirements. Trust that football decisions would be driven by football considerations. Trust that the people absorbing the physical cost of the tournament were being fully heard. Whether those concerns are justified or not almost misses the point. The important thing is that so many players felt compelled to raise them. And once enough athletes begin asking the same questions, the conversation becomes much harder to control. Then came perhaps the most complicated story of all, Iran, because Iran's challenges had very little to do with tactics, formations, or football strategy. Instead, they highlighted something the World Cup can never fully escape: politics, travel restrictions, administrative complications, questions about access, questions about supporters, questions about preparation, while other teams focused on training sessions and match plans. Iran found itself dealing with issues that existed far beyond the boundaries of sport, yet they still competed. They still traveled. They still took the field, and in doing so, they exposed one of the central contradictions of modern football. FIFA promotes the World Cup as a universal event open to everyone. Reality is often far more complicated, and Iran is unlikely to be the last example. One of the defining characteristics of World Cup 2026 is that it stretches across an enormous geographical and political landscape. Different laws, different border systems, different administrative requirements. Every participating nation enters the same tournament, but not necessarily under the same circumstances. For decades, football has tried to separate itself from politics. The reality is that major international tournaments often reveal how difficult that separation can be. The bigger the World Cup becomes, the harder it becomes to isolate football from the world around it. And then we arrive at the final revolt, the one connecting all the others, the revolt against the tournament itself. World Cup 2026 is unlike anything football has attempted before. 3 countries, 16 cities, vast travel distances, and constant adaptation. Every team accepts those conditions because participation in the World Cup is the dream. But acceptance does not necessarily mean satisfaction. Coaches are discussing logistics almost as often as tactics. Players are discussing recovery almost as often as opponents. The expanded format has created opportunities. It has also created pressures, and as the first week unfolded, it became increasingly clear that many participants believe those pressures deserve more attention than they are receiving. None of these stories are identical. A superstar rejecting a media obligation, Cape Verde shocking Spain, players challenging tournament conditions, Iran navigating geopolitical complications, teams questioning the demands of the expanded format, different events, different causes, different consequences, yet they all point toward the same thing: a growing gap between FIFA's vision and the experience of the people living inside that vision. The remarkable thing is that football itself remains brilliant. The goals keep coming, the surprises keep coming, the drama keeps coming. The World Cup still feels magical. But alongside that magic, another conversation has emerged, a conversation about player welfare, a commercial influence, tournament design, logistics, growth. The first week of World Cup 2026 may ultimately be remembered. For more than football, it may be remembered as the moment participants began openly questioning whether the biggest World Cup in history is also becoming the most difficult World Cup in history. And if that conversation continues, FIFA may discover that the biggest challenge facing this tournament is not happening on the pitch at all. But before we bring all of these stories together, it's worth remembering something important. None of these incidents have stopped the tournament. The stadiums remain packed. Television audiences remain enormous. Fans continue traveling across continents to support their teams. The football itself remains captivating. That is exactly why these stories matter. They are not signs of failure, they are signs of tension. Signs that the tournament is growing faster than at any point in its history. And whenever something grows that quickly, questions inevitably follow. Questions about sustainability, questions about priorities, questions about whether expansion is creating new challenges. Faster than solutions can be found,